And welcome into the Voice of College Football, presented by FanDuel. Appreciate you stopping by for the best in discussion, debate, and analysis. What this is all about is lining up history and giving it factual information, statistics, compilation of numbers, and then also, of course, context. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Please like the video before we get revved up. Please subscribe, do all those good things. And then, of course, I have left the call-in line there in the chat if you would like to respond to the rankings that I am unveiling. So one thing cannot be argued, and that's that all of these numbers are factual. So how they're presented, how much weight they're given, whether they should be considered, whether other numbers should be considered, other statistics, other lists should be considered. All of that can be argued. What cannot be argued are the numbers. So we are going to present the numbers in 24 categories. There may be somebody out there that is doing a more exhaustive look at the history of college football and comparing these schools, these programs, in terms of lists and rankings and compilation of statistics. However, I doubt it. I don't know. Please let me know who out there has a more exhaustive look at the all-time landscape of college football. I will do the same for the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12. Of course, we run into a number of issues because of realignment. So we have dealt with those as best I know how. It is difficult to rank Oregon, USC, UCLA, Washington against the rest of the Big 10 because they just entered the league 2 seasons ago. Therefore, I made certain calculations that are just national ranking, just the compilation of the winning percentage or the compilation of the major bowls won or the bowl games won or the NFL draft selections, which basically can be, for the most part, compared across the board, across the nation, and then other things need to be determined in a different way, and I will explain as we go, like conference championships. Of course, Oregon's got 1 conference championship. They've accomplished that in 2 seasons. So from one perspective, Oregon has accomplished more in the Big 10 than anyone in the history of the conference because they are winning the conference 50% of the time. But obviously, the sample size is minuscule, so that shouldn't be considered to be an overriding fact. But they did win the conference in 1 season. So you cannot go to either extreme. You cannot say, well, Oregon wins the conference 50% of the time. They're the most dominant team to ever play in the Big 10. Of course not. But you can also not say they've won 1 conference championship and Michigan's won 45. What's wrong with Oregon? They're horrible. Of course, they've been in the league for 2 years. So you can't go to either extreme. You got to bring context into the situation. So again, it is impossible to completely, fairly compile all these numbers and statistics when we've had this fluctuation of teams. And of course, we've had this great fluctuation in major programs just here in the last 10 or 12 years. Texas A&M, Missouri to the SEC, Oklahoma, Texas to the SEC, the 4 from the West Coast to the Big 10. Before that, Nebraska, Rutgers, Maryland. All this upheaval in the Big 12, of course, with teams leaving, and now schools have entered the Big 12. The Big 12 looks like a completely different league, or at least half the league is completely different than it was. And then you've got the issue with independent status for years and years and years for programs like Miami, South Carolina, Syracuse, West Virginia, and others that played independent schedules. Therefore, no conference championships for Notre Dame. So what do we do with that? We are focused today on the Big 10. I've released videos that have looked at 24 categories. So when I say this is exhaustive, it's pretty darn exhaustive. 24 categories. So I in no way do I believe that these categories are of equal value. I do not think that it should count how many players and coaches you've had inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame should count as much as conference championships or winning percentage or national championships. No way. No way. No way. No way. I just added that to give some more details, more information. So we've got a list of Pro Football Hall of Famers. We've got a list of College Football Hall of Famers. Again, I think that those are the least important categories. I also think that award winners is one of the lesser important categories because, again, that is extremely subjective. So you have concrete, undeniable statistics, and the list, therefore, is undeniable. Winning percentage. Now, certain teams have tougher schedules than others, but over the course of 100+ years, winning percentage is pretty darn valid. Conference championships. Yes, some teams won conference championships with lesser schedules, especially in this modern era where we have such a disparity in scheduling between teams in the Big Ten. But traditionally, for 90+% of the time throughout the history of the Big Ten, these schedules have been extremely comparable because we've had a 10-team Big Ten through 1992. For the most part, a 10-team Big Ten. Therefore, everyone played everyone, except for much of that history, they played 8-game conference schedules. Therefore, you missed one team. But the scheduling was very, very, very comparable within minuscule percentage points. As opposed to now, we can look at, for example, Ohio State's schedule in 2025, easy. Ohio State's Big Ten schedule in 2026, very, very difficult. Same thing with Michigan. Played an easy schedule last season, played a very difficult schedule the season before. But fortunately, at this point, we don't really have to deal with that in ranking these teams because for the most part, throughout most of the history of the Big Ten, everyone was playing everyone almost completely. Again, we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. All I ask is that you please like the video, even if you don't agree with me, even if you think I'm the worst, whatever. Please, if you enjoy the content and bringing to the forefront the debate, the discussion, the analysis, then please like the video. Please subscribe. We are presented by FanDuel. Also, the Amazon links in the description section of this video and all the videos. And basically, I have several incentives to do this and to create content and to come on here live. Money is not that. But yes, I would like to earn a portion of my income here. Let's be blunt about that. However, I don't show up for money because I could be doing other things and do other things throughout the week that make me far more money and support myself and others. But this is fun. But we would like to do more content, more shows, and we are launching a show on Monday. So Monday after the basketball national championship game, we will be here live to take on the executive order, to take on the happenings in college football across the board. And then also because spring football is in full swing, and we've had a couple spring games at places, notably Clemson and Nebraska. But the spring games really kick in over the next 3 weekends. We'll be here on Monday night at a time to be determined. Now, this Monday night, it's going to be after the men's national championship game. Going forward, we will select a time, probably pretty late night, 10, 11 p.m. Eastern time, something in that range, to talk college football with you. And the two main topics are going to be my spring football takes, and number two, my response to all the legislation and all of the proposed legislation and the impact, therefore, and all of the rhetoric, all of the decisions that have to be made, all of the big, big topic issues that have to be dealt with, NIL, transfer portal, and eligibility in particular, but we'll get to that on Monday night. Let's get to the Big Ten rankings. I've left the link in the chat. I will take calls if anyone would like to talk to me after we run through the rankings. Joe, thank you so much for the comment there. Michigander, good to see you. Chris, good to see you. there as well. So let's present the numbers. And again, I have posted videos with most of these numbers. I did not get to all of them, and that's why we're doing this. All right. So I thought it important, first and foremost, to simply lay out when did these teams join the conference, because that has a lot to do with the compilation of statistics, obviously. So when did the various schools join the Big Ten? So we've got Big Ten membership from the initial season of 1896 by Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, Northwestern, Purdue, Wisconsin. Those are the charter members of the Big Ten. Those 6 schools: Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, Northwestern, Purdue, Wisconsin, 1896. A mere 3 seasons later, 2 schools added, Indiana and Iowa. So they have near full membership in the Big Ten since day one. Ohio State, kind of on an island to a certain extent by itself, joining, let's see, what would be 13 years later in 1912. And then Michigan State is really by itself, having been in the league roughly half the time. So Michigan started in 1950. Michigan State by itself in 1950. Penn State, of course, many of us now can remember the rest of these members and the time at which they joined. Of course, it was a big deal when Penn State went from independent status to joining the Big Ten, starting with the 1993 football season, and then Nebraska by itself leaving the Big 12, joining in 2011, then Maryland, Rutgers, 2014, and then we've got the 4 from the West Coast just 2 seasons ago. Okay, so that sets the stage for the rest of the numbers. Now, again, many of these numbers are going to be just national statistics like winning percentage or national championships or national championships claimed or NFL draft selections. But many of these numbers are going to be in conference, just simply conference comparisons. So here we go. It's difficult to compare, but we have to give it up for Michigan owning the most conference championships. Now, of course, an Ohio State fan may say, well, we have 7 less seasons. That's why we have not won as many conference championships, because if you're not in the conference, you can't win the conference championship. However, it's pretty easy to see. You don't have to be a mathematician to see that Michigan has won a higher percentage during the seasons they've been in the league. They have the grand total lead 45-40 over Ohio State and only have 7 more seasons. So obviously it would be a huge ask for Ohio State to win 5 Big Ten championships in 7 seasons. Therefore, Michigan is the outright winner of this category, 45 conference championships overall. That's the number 1 total. It's also the number 1 figure based on percentage, unless you want to get ridiculous and say Oregon's won 1 Big Ten championship in 2 seasons. We addressed that at the top. Minnesota has not won a Big Ten championship in forever. I believe their last shared Big Ten title was in 1967, but they still rank number 3 with 18. Then we see Illinois. Illinois, as you will see, is an interesting school to track, because when it comes to Big Ten championships, 15, and we see outright Big Ten championships coming up here, they also rank high, number 3 in the conference. However, so they have peaked and they have had strong seasons, certainly not in the last 4 or 5 decades. Illinois' last Big Ten championship, I believe, was in 2001. And then before that had not had one going back to 1983. And then before that, going back to the 50s or 60s. So most of this damage done by Illinois in the 20s and 30s. But what's fascinating is that overall, Illinois does not rank anywhere near where it does with conference championships. But a theme you will see, and I would think that this is going to be the case in every conference. Every time I switch, and come back, then it messes up my page. That is very annoying. All right, there we go. The theme that we will see over and over and over is that basically what justifies and validates many of these categories is that you will see the pattern of the same schools in the same tiers. You will see Ohio State and Michigan at the top of everything. You will see Ohio State separate itself in many of these categories by itself, but you will see Ohio State, Michigan at the top. Then you will see a gap, and you will see generally in the other categories a clump of Michigan State and Wisconsin. They're next to each other all over the place. Michigan State, Wisconsin, Iowa. Of course, Penn State factors into this differently. And when you take into consideration their play in the Big Ten has been strong. It's been third or fourth since they joined 30 some years ago. And of course, Nebraska has been a national, let the argument ensue, blue blood, if you go there, elite program since certainly the 1960s and 70s. So Nebraska and Penn State, they're next. If you include, in I mentioned the other schools because obviously they've been in the league for generations, where Nebraska and Penn State has been a much shorter time. But when looking at national statistics, Ohio State, Michigan, gap, Penn State, Nebraska, gap, and then this smattering of Michigan State, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota in certain categories because of their prowess in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. They last won a national championship, the Gophers, in 1960. And then the bottom is all Indiana, Northwestern. And then if you include Rutgers and Maryland on the national scale, they're there as well. And Rutgers, in many categories, much like Ohio State, is by itself, but at the very bottom. All right, so those are the seasons played. Those are the conference championships. Michigan #1 at 45, Ohio State at 40. So I did want to still do my best to rank the 4 West Coast schools. And of course, Nebraska, Maryland, Rutgers have short stays in the Big Ten as well. So what we have here in red, messes up every time I switch over. What we have in red is the number of conference championships in the Big Ten for those schools, which is 0 across the board, except Oregon in 2024. And then the next number after the dash, follow along, are conference championships in other conferences. For Nebraska, of course, that's the Big 8 and the Big 12. For Maryland, that's the ACC. For Rutgers, that's the Big East Championship in like 2007, I believe. And then you've got, of course, the 4 schools from the West Coast where USC dominated the Pac-8, the Pac-10, the Pac-12, 37 conference championships. So I wanted to give credit to those schools, of course, for being dominant or whatever their success rate in those leagues, their previous leagues. And then you will see how that factors into the rankings later. Okay, so those are the numbers of Big Ten championships in the first column on the left, and then overall conference championships in other leagues, power conferences. And then we go to the next column, which is the number of years that those schools have been in the Big Ten. 2 seasons from the teams from the West Coast, 12 seasons for Maryland and Rutgers, and another few seasons for Nebraska, 15 in the Big Ten. And then the number of seasons played in the other conferences that led to their conference championships. And again, the rundown is Nebraska 41, USC 37, Washington 18, UCLA, Oregon 17 and 14, Maryland 9, Rutgers with 1 conference championship. Now we will go to, if I get some cooperation here, These are outright conference championships. So let's understand here that we have a situation where prior to 2011 in the Big Ten, we did not have a Big Ten championship game. Therefore, we had shared conference championships. The most ridiculous one I can remember was 1990. Ohio State had a chance to win the Big Ten outright. They went for it on fourth down. Michigan kicked the game-winning field goal that knocked Ohio State out of the Rose Bowl in the Big Ten championship and created a four-way tie for the Big Ten championship between Michigan, Iowa, Illinois, and Michigan State. There was also a big three-way tie in 2000 between Michigan, Northwestern, and Purdue. Yes, that was in 2000. So anyway, there were ties for Big Ten championships. Actually, the final season prior to the Big Ten championship game, Wisconsin, Michigan State, and Ohio State all went 8-1 or 7-1, whatever number of games they played. They only lost one game each and tied for the Big Ten championship. Wisconsin went to the Rose Bowl. So anyway, you had ties for championships. So it was a big deal for a team to separate itself and win the Big Ten championship by itself. Let me see the last time that would have been done, because in 2010, there was a tie. 2009, off the top of my head, Ohio State, I believe, was the sole winner of the Big Ten in 2009. I might be wrong. 2008, there was a tie between Ohio State and Penn State. 2007, it was Ohio State. And did Illinois tie for the Big Ten championship that year? 2007 might have been a three-way tie between Ohio State, Michigan, and Illinois. No. Ohio State won the Big Ten outright in 2007. Illinois and Michigan tied for second. So anyway, a lot of ties between teams for Big Ten championships. Ohio State is the most outright. So Michigan's got the most Big Ten championships, 45-40 over the Buckeyes, but the Buckeyes have the most Big Ten outright championships, 24-19. And there you see the rest of the list. I also included the teams from the West Coast in terms of outright championships. I find it funny that in their first season in the Big Ten, that Oregon won an outright Big Ten championship, and Purdue has one outright Big Ten championship. And Purdue is a founding member of the Big Ten. Purdue has one outright championship in 130 years, and Oregon got one in its first season. Before we move on, I will check the chat. If you do call in, keep in mind that you're going to have to wait a bit, because I will take your calls, but I want to run through all these categories. Michael's here. Good to see you, Michael. I think you will enjoy this live stream, because we're going through the history of the Big Ten. As Joe's bringing up with the SEC Conference Championship game possibly going away, there was a comment made the other day by the Alabama athletic director. We will keep in mind that I'm going to be doing the same exercise for the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12. Chris believes that Maryland was a good addition to the Big Ten. They were a good addition for everybody else beating up on them. That's no question about that. Joe letting us know that FanDuel is the best betting site in the U.S. And again, our corporate sponsor here at the Voice of College Football across the network. Michigander says, I never understood why Maryland left the ACC to join the Big Ten, and now they're irrelevant. Maryland could have been significant in the ACC. True. But you're a sports fan, Michigander. The folks at the University of Maryland were looking at dollar signs. Interesting note here by Joe about Michigan State's entry into the Big Ten. Yes, barely made it in a close vote over Pitt. All right, let's get back to the rankings. So I wanted to give credit to outright championships in other conferences. USC's been exceptional, of course, in the Pac 8, 10, and 12, 29 total championships. So that ranks number one, and I'll let you know how I factor that into the final vote totals, the final point totals. Nebraska, dominant seasons, of course, in the Big 8 and the Big 12 with 23 conference championships. Washington's done well, UCLA, and Oregon, Maryland in the Pac conferences and the ACC. So the ACC only started in 1953. So Maryland, give them a little bit more credit. They work at a disadvantage here, having only been in a conference since 1953. But they did win the ACC 9 times, 7 times outright since 1953. All right, we next move on to the all-important winning percentage. All right. So what we have here is simply all-time winning percentage. Ohio State is the number one winning percentage in all of college football history, 758. Michigan there at 732. Of course, Michigan's won the most games. 1,031, I believe, is the total for Michigan. Ohio State's around 990. They're about 40 behind, something like that. USC, of course, just a couple ticks under 70% winning percentage. Penn State, Nebraska. And you will see this lineup of characters in every category to some extent. So Ohio State with the best winning percentage of all time in the history of college football. So certainly number one in the Big Ten with a pretty sizable lead, actually, when you think about it. And I've run the numbers pre and post World War II. And Michigan pre-World War II's, their winning percentage was around 78%. And Ohio State was around 65, 66%. So Ohio State has raised its winning percentage since World War II from about 65%, 66% to 75+%. And Michigan's has slightly dropped. USC, Penn State, Nebraska, of course, huge factors in college football. Washington's got a nice history. It's a bit spotty, a bit sketchy, but they have certainly had their stretches of elite play. UCLA may surprise some people. As we go through these lists, UCLA may surprise some people. Right here, UCLA is 7th all-time in Big Ten winning percentage. Of course, these games were not won in the Big Ten, but we are just, again, comparing Big Ten programs against each other, but it would be impossible for me to make up some kind of formula that would transfer the strength of the Pac-12 over the course of history versus the Big Ten. So it is what it is. There you see Michigan State, Wisconsin. Wisconsin in particular, an interesting case, of course, horrible in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Had some proud moments before that, but basically Wisconsin has been strong since Barry Alvarez took over. Oregon, if we would have compiled these numbers 10 to 15 years ago, Oregon would be down near the bottom. They have made up a lot of ground. Of course, it's been a good program. Mike Bellotti in particular as head coach in the 1980s, 90s, 2000s. But of course, Chip Kelly post, Oregon's been an elite program, arguably one of the top 5 programs in the country in the last 10 or 15 years. So Oregon has certainly increased all of these numbers significantly in the last 10 or 15 years, where Nebraska has been dragged down by the last 10 or 15 years. No programs have benefited or been penalized by their own incompetency, in Nebraska's case, by the last 10 or 15 years than Oregon and Nebraska. Nebraska on the downside, Oregon on the upside. And we will see the Nebraska numbers just plummet recently. So there's winning percentage. And I apologize that I can't show everyone at the same time, all the teams. So there we go, on down the list with Michigan State factors in pretty well in these rankings. A little bit better than I expected. Wisconsin, Oregon, Minnesota, of course, had their great runs in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. I was there. Iowa's really benefited, of course, from Kirk Ferentz and Hayden Fry. Maryland, most of that work done in the ACC. And prior to that, Purdue, Illinois. And I mentioned in looking at conference championships that Illinois sits much higher in terms of conference championships, both shared and outright, than you will see Illinois' place in the Big Ten in all these other statistics. Of course, Rutgers, Northwestern, Indiana, some of the worst programs in the history of college football. If you cannot win 50% of your games, considering that you should win your out-of-conference games, almost all of them, because you're playing MAC schools and FCS schools, it's pitiful that Rutgers, Northwestern, and Indiana are at the bottom. Indiana is one of the worst programs in history. Northwestern has, of course, been much stronger post 1995. So it's been a good 30 years that Northwestern's been pretty respectable. Gary Barnett, the Rose Bowl team of 1995. And since then, Northwestern's been pretty strong. But Indiana, of course, has been a train wreck. They've been horrible. But now we got Kurt Cignetti in the last two seasons. And it's funny, for as horrible as Indiana's been, just these last two seasons has, like, if I took off, what are they the last 2 years? They are 27-2. That winning percentage would drop like 15 points. All right, so that's all-time winning percentage. Ohio State's number one in the nation. In the Big Ten, Michigan 2, USC 3, Penn State, Nebraska are the heavy hitters. Washington, the only other school over 60%. Okay, these are AP ranking points. So, am I a critic of the AP? Absolutely. Do I make fun of the AP? Absolutely. Do I point out the AP's flaws on a regular basis? Absolutely. However, let's understand that over time, I do not believe that there's any specific bias in the AP, like they favor the SEC or they favor a particular school. There are people out there in college football fan bases that believe, for example, Notre Dame gets a boost, Texas gets a boost. If you go to preseason rankings and you compare them to postseason rankings, there is no justification for that. There is no confirmation of that whatsoever. Okay. So over time, I believe that the AP rankings are pretty valid and tell us a lot. So I've included this category. So these are AP ranking points. So what does that mean? That means that at the end of each season, there are AP ranking points, not the vote totals. I'm talking about the place in the standings of the AP top 25. So, for example, this past season, Indiana won the national championship. Of course, they were the AP number one team. Therefore, they get 25 points. Miami was number 2. They get 24 points. Whoever was number 25 in the nation gets 1 point. That's how it works. So your weekly ranking means nothing. It's just whatever the final AP ranking is. And this goes back to 1936. So everything prior to 1936, you will not see represented here. This is simply since 1936. Ohio State has been the most successful AP team in the Big Ten. They might be the most successful in all of college football. We will see as we continue the series. Do you see a pattern here? Michigan's number 2, USC 3, Nebraska 4, Penn State 5. UCLA may surprise. See the gap there between Penn State and UCLA? So those 5 schools are going to be on top of almost everything. Ohio State, Michigan, USC, Nebraska, Penn State. And it's usually going to be Ohio State, Michigan, then USC a little bit behind, and then Nebraska and Penn State. And then a drop-off to whomever, and here it's UCLA. and you see UCLA, Michigan State, Washington pretty much in the same class. Might be surprised that Iowa has not fared well in AP rankings because they were completely off the map for decades. And Iowa is a school that's catching up. And of course, Oregon's catching up. Again, if we subtracted the last 10 or 15 years of college football, Oregon would plummet in these standings. Iowa would drop a bit because Iowa's been really strong. And you will see this in just a second over the last 10 or 15 years, 20 years, and on down the list. Rutgers, for as horrible, and I'm trying to keep track of what you guys can see versus what I can see. For as horrible as Indiana football has been, consider this. Indiana has accumulated 117 AP points. Now, consider the last 2 years, they've accumulated, 25 this past season, and like 18 or 19 the year before when they finished, number 10 or 11 in the country. So Indiana's accumulated like a third of those points in the last 2 seasons. However, it just goes to show you how horrible Rutgers has been. Indiana's arguably the worst program in the history of college football, and Rutgers is worse. Okay. Then we go to weeks at number 1. Do I think this is important? Not really. Does it show how great a program is? Generally, yes. You're not going to be number 1 a zillion weeks and then lose 5 games every year after you were number 1. It's obviously there's a consistent, the accumulation of numbers over time becomes more and more valid. Because again, is there a particular season in which a team could be number 1 in the country for the first 3 weeks of the season and finish 6-6? Absolutely. Could Florida State be number 1 or number 10 in the country, in the top 10 in the country in the preseason, and then finish 2-10? Absolutely. But over time, this certainly plays itself out as a valid statistic. Does it matter that a team's number 1 in October? No, I'm not saying that. Just another statistic to give more information to all of us. Ohio State's been number 1, I believe, more weeks than anybody in the country except Alabama. I believe. USC, number 2 in the Big Ten. Nebraska, it's been forever since Nebraska was number 1. Probably Eric Crouch, 2001. For USC, I would think the last time they were number 1, I believe they were number 1 early in the season under Lane Kiffin in 2012. For Ohio State, it's just been this last year. For Michigan, it was obviously in 2023. For Michigan State, the last time they were number 1 in the country, I would think, was 1966. With Duffy Doherty leading the way. Bubba Smith and that crew. Penn State, last time they were number 1, 21. You would probably win a lot of bets that Michigan State would not have more number 1 weeks than Penn State. The last time Penn State was number 1, I know they were in 1997, and I know that they were with LeVar Arrington and Courtney Brown in 1999. They may have been number 1 in 2005 when they went 11-1, maybe, but that was owned by Texas and USC. I do not believe Penn State was number 1 that season. They might have been number 1 in 2008. That might be the last time Penn State was number 1. Minnesota, Oregon. Oregon has been number 1 as recent as, I believe, 2024. Yeah, they went undefeated in the regular season. So Oregon racked up some of those weeks just in 2024. Washington, you got to go back to like 2000. And then, of course, Washington had the national championship split in 1991. And on down the line, I believe. So we've got Illinois and Rutgers have never been number 1 in the country. Indiana's only 2 weeks at number 1 in the country. You guessed it, 2025. Bowl wins. How important are bowl wins? Not as important as they used to be. But we're still looking at bowl wins. And I'll check the chat briefly. Anything there? Okay. Bowl wins. Now let's consider when we talk about bowls, of course, in the last 5 to 10 years, they've been tainted by opt-outs. But even prior to that, if you're just strictly looking at bowl games, I will use Ohio State as an example because they are the best example of this. It's kind of difficult to win. And this is before the playoffs. Let's take the playoffs out of this because obviously Indiana just racked up 3 bowl wins this past. And when I say bowl wins, I am tabulating postseason wins. They're almost exactly the same. Indiana just picked up 3 this past season. Now, of course, throughout the history of college football, teams could not accumulate multiple bowl wins, postseason wins in one season. This is a new thing as of 2014. And of course, it's been exponentially lifted here in the last couple seasons. Ohio State won 4 major bowl games in 2024, and Indiana just won 3. Does this mean something? Yes. Is it some all-encompassing statistic that should be taken as being completely justified? No. Because my original point was going to be that if you track, let's say, Ohio State in the last 20 or 25 years, they have played like one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the country in every postseason. Virtually every postseason, Ohio State has played one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the country. Therefore, it's more difficult to accumulate bowl wins. On the other hand, our buddy PJ Fleck has won 7 consecutive bowl games. I believe Minnesota's won 7 straight. He's won 6 straight. So he's racked up a lot of bowl wins for Minnesota. But we also have to consider they're defeating Syracuse, Georgia Tech, New Mexico State. So in context here, the best schools with the best programs, the elite programs, still win out the most bowl wins. But let's understand the better schools are playing the better teams, and it's more difficult to win the games. So if we put opponent's bowl record or opponent's record next to the bowl wins, then we would see this play out a little bit differently. However, USC has been the most successful postseason team of current Big Ten teams. We understand that they weren't a Big Ten team for the majority of this. But USC's number 1 at 36. Penn State, under Joe Paterno. Penn State was going out there winning bowl games almost every year. Joe Paterno has one of the best bowl winning percentages of all time. James Franklin, despite some of his flaws, won a lot of bowl games. They won the Fiesta Bowl in 17. They won the Cotton Bowl in 19. They won the Rose Bowl in 22. Yeah, they won a couple playoff games his final full season. Ohio State right there at 30, Nebraska 27, Michigan 24. I could have put bowl records there. I could have included the losses, of course. But there you go. Iowa, of course, very successful since the early 80s. Wisconsin since the early 90s. Oregon is catching up. And UCLA and on down the line. Consider Indiana. Indiana just won 3 postseason games this past year. They have 6 in their history. They had 3 before December. They doubled it. Kurt Signetti doubled Indiana's all-time bowl wins. Not talking about like major, huge, enormous wins. Talking about like Indiana not being able to win like the Copper Bowl. I believe the last time Indiana won a postseason game before Kurt Signetti was 1993. So there you go. Indiana. All right. Then we've got major bowl wins. So this would include playoff wins. USC. If you want to see an impressive statistic in college football, check out USC's Rose Bowl record. For as dominant and great as Ohio State and Michigan have been in the Big Ten, going to the Rose Bowl and winning a fair share of those games, USC, its Rose Bowl record is like 20-7. I might be off by a game or two. All right, major bowl wins. USC number 1, 27, Ohio State 25, Penn State, Nebraska, Michigan. That could surprise some people that Michigan has only won 13 major bowl games. The last 2 of those would be in winning the national championship in 2023. So they tacked on 2 more there against Washington and Alabama. Washington, their last one, its final appearance in a major bowl game, the game prior to the Michigan game, of course, when they beat Texas. Oregon won one this year against Texas Tech in the Orange Bowl. UCLA has not won a major bowl game since 1990. They lost the Rose Bowl in 98. They won a Cotton Bowl in 97. Yeah, most of those UCLA wins are under Terry Donahue in the 80s. They won 3 Rose Bowls in the 80s. There you see Michigan State, Wisconsin on down the line. And then we also have, again, oh, this is crazy. Indiana has won 3 major bowl games. When did those occur? Indiana won all of its major bowl games this season. That's it. So there you go. All right. Next category. Winning percentage. Okay. So this is important. And this is something I think that gets bypassed from time to time in all of this, is looking at, and this is a more accurate statistic than actually overall winning percentage, because the teams that you schedule outside the conference or playing bowl games can vary greatly. But the teams you play within the conference, again, the conference schedule have gotten very disparate in difficulty just in the last couple of years. But over the course of time, the conference scheduling has been almost identical. So this statistic might be the most valid statistic here. This might be the one, because they all played the same teams almost to an infinitesimal degree. Ohio State's get the best winning percentage. Man, that always messes me up every time Ohio State has the best winning percentage in conference games, 753. Michigan's number 2. Penn State's number 3, of course. That's only since 1993. So you would think Penn State would have a bit of an advantage, because over the course of time, it's difficult to maintain elite statistics, because there's a probability that you're going to have slumps. But for Penn State, that's since 1993. Of course, Michigan State, that's since 1950. Now, that stat, I posted this on X the other day, not because of Ohio State or Michigan. It was because of Michigan State. I said, there's a school here that surprises me slightly. I know Michigan State's history. It's at least like post-1960. It's logged up here pretty well. But this did surprise me a bit, that Michigan State is 4th all-time in conference winning percentage. Iowa's at 484, And you got to believe that that number is just, they're winning 60+% of their games in conference over the last 4 decades. Minnesota, Purdue, Illinois on down the line. Look at Nebraska. Now, of course, this is their winning percentage in the Big Ten since 2011. And they had a decent first 5 years. And since then, they've been horrendous. Nebraska is only winning 44% of its games in the Big Ten. And then, I included the 4 from the West Coast, and these are their winning percentages in the Big Ten. So technically, Oregon has the best winning percentage of all time in the Big Ten, 2 seasons. Look at Rutgers, winning 20% of its games. So over the course of 12 seasons, 9 games a season, that's 81. They're like 15-65 or something horrendous like that. 18-62 or something like that. Terrible. What has Rutgers added to the Big Ten? All right. Now we go to winning percentage since 1970. I appreciate the super chat. We'll get to it in just a second. Winning percentage since 1970. So, yes, I have my critics, my detractors that say, Mark, you just throw that up there to brag about Ohio State. Okay. If I had some master database, I would throw up everyone's numbers since every year. Meaning I would say, you know what? Let's see what it is since 1960, since 1944 at the end of the war. I would throw up every number, and I had to sit and calculate that one night, school by school, and then now I just add to it. So fortunately, I've done this years ago, and now I just have to go through and add the previous season. So no, I do not have the database that can do this for every year, so 1970s, just a year. It's just an arbitrary year. But at the time that I did this, I thought, well, it's about 50 years ago. Number one. So it's a good length of time. There's nothing magical about 1970. Let's make this straight. I'm not trying to gerrymander the process. Just thought it's about 50 years. It's roughly my lifetime. So maybe I'm a little bit biased. Yes, we all are. But I also considered this. This is valid. Segregation. The quality of play from the black athlete, the integration of the sport. There was not a year of integration. So you cannot go to 1963 and say, this is when the game, you cannot go to Jackie Robinson in Major League Baseball and say, this is the demarcation. But by 1970, the sport was fully integrated. So I do believe that that brings us to more validity for this statistic. Okay. Ohio State, 783. Just think about that number, that winning percentage for 56 seasons. 783. Just a couple ticks under 80%, maintaining that for 56 years. Michigan, to its credit, fairly close behind. Now, it would take them a lot to make up 4 percentage points over time, but still, 741, extremely good. We will see later, folks, where these numbers rank nationally when we put it all together. It's going to take a while. Got to get through the SEC, the Big 12, and the ACC. And the Big 12 is going to be a mess with all those schools going back and forth. Penn State, 724. Nebraska. Think about the Nebraska number. The Nebraska number from 1970 to 98, 99. Probably the best in college football. But they have been dragged down by the last 10 years in particular. USC, of course, strong. USC dominant in the 70s and dominant in the 2000s under Pete Carroll, of course. Washington, Oregon, again, the Oregon number, that is skyrocketing. The UCLA number going down. We could go back 5 years and Oregon and UCLA would be flipped. Wisconsin, that's been going up in the last 30 years. Iowa, been going up in the last 30 to 40 years. Iowa had a horrendous 1970s, as did Wisconsin. Where are we? Oh, yeah. And then we've got the bottom of the barrel. Look at Northwestern winning 39% of its games since 1970. And Indiana, again, has been bolstered by Curt Cignetti the last 2 years. Illinois, Purdue, playing under 500 football since 1970. I'm a bit surprised by Purdue because I started watching college football. By 1978, I became a junkie, like, boom, hardcore, watching everything I can get a hold of, reading everything I can get a hold of. 1978. Well, Purdue was terrible. Wait a minute. No, Purdue was not terrible in 1978. They were Mark Herman, that crew. They were really good, actually. 78, 79, 80, 81. They were good. Purdue was good. They weren't competing for national championships, but they were 7-4, 8-3 good. Blue Bonnet Bowl, Peach Bowl good for about 10 years there until the late 80s. Jim Everett, Rod Woodson, that crew. And then came, and Michael Hogue can appreciate this breakdown. And then came the Jim Coletto years, and they were horrible for about 10 years plus. And then came the 1998 season, or the 97 season. They had a nice breakthrough with Billy Dickens at quarterback just prior to Drew Brees. And then, of course, Joe Tiller. And yes, Purdue was then, they were back to that 8-3 good for 8-3, 9-3, 8-4 good. Went to the Rose Bowl, of course, in 2000 for about 10 years. And then Danny Hope and Drew Hazel. I'm forgetting his first name. Coach Hazel. Terrible. Daryl Hazel. Terrible. So when I think of Purdue, I think all those good stretches, I'm surprised that their record is that bad. And then, of course, Jeff Brom did a decent job. PJ Fleck, Glenn Mason, those guys, Tracy Claeys did a nice job for Minnesota, but largely Minnesota was horrible in the 70s in particular. All right. Michigan State, of course, Mark D'Antonio meant a lot to that winning percentage of 549. All right. Here is post 2000. So I shouldn't necessarily have to justify this number. It's the 21st century. And again, my little grid is screwing up on me. Post 2000. So the numbers for Ohio State just get better and better the more recent you get. Pretty huge lead since 2000. And they actually had a bad season in 2001. If you went like 2002, it probably jumped to like 88, 89%. Oregon, strong. USC, generally strong. Michigan, of course, from 2008, post Lloyd Carr through Brady Hoke and Rich Rod, bad. So they had a 7-year stretch that really drags down their winning percentage. And of course, then Harbaugh was strong, winning 75, 78% of his games, and especially the 3-year run. Wisconsin, strong. Penn State, a little spotty under Joe Pa, but strong. They had some really bad years under Joe Pa, just like 3 really bad seasons, but he was still going strong from 2000 through the end of his tenure into James Franklin. I'm actually surprised that Penn State is not higher on this list, because I don't think of Penn State having, again, Joe Pa was pretty much going 9-3 throughout much of that run. And then James Franklin doing extremely well. But the two probation years weren't great, 7-5, 8-4. Nebraska, there we start to see Nebraska. Did you remember their winning percentage post 1970 was 72%? Now it's down to 57% because they've just been terrible. And the rest of the Big Ten post 2000, Iowa strong. Washington went 0-12 in 2007. And on down the line, Northwestern's been respectable. There you see your sub 500 teams. Indiana, of course, has been atrocious. And Indiana's just a completely different program now. And Illinois has been bad. There was some kind of statistic out after Brett Bielema won the 9 games he won this year. He went 10-3 the year before. I think he went 9-4 this year. No, 10-3. 10-3. That's the first those are the first back-to-back double-digit and I think even 9-win seasons for Illinois back-to-back since the 80s. All right, so that's post 2000. Then when we go to the college football playoff era, Ohio State's winning percentage is just off the charts. And of course, yes, it is off the charts. It's off my chart because I don't even know where we are now. There we go. We'll get it straight. So this is 2014 on, the last 12 seasons. Ohio State winning almost 90% of its games. That's the number one figure, I'm almost certain, in college football. A bit better than Georgia and Alabama. Oregon strong. Michigan. So that's Michigan 2014. That's Harbaugh. That's one season without Harbaugh, then Harbaugh kicking in 2015. So Michigan generally strong during that time. Penn State, Iowa's been really good. USC's a disappointment. Wisconsin, well, they were good from 2014 up until a few years ago, and their percentage has been dragged down in recent years. And on down the list, of course, Mark D'Antonio is the reason Michigan State is decent. UCLA's been bad. Nebraska, look at Nebraska. And they were actually decent in 2014, 15, 16, 17, and just Purdue's been horrible since 2014. Maryland, horrible. Rutgers, I'm surprised they're that high. That's their overall winning percentage. So think about this. This shows you something right here. Rutgers has by far the worst winning percentage in the Big Ten in conference games since 2014, same year as the playoffs started. But their winning percentage is still bad, but it's not atrocious. That is Rutgers beating up on horrible MAC teams and FCS teams in non-conference play and boosting its record is what that is. All right, let me hit the questions. Adam's showing up. Adam, thank you so much for this. Mark, on Sunday, Drew Aller will throw an interception to the Easter Bunny. Would you support capping NIL spending at $10 million per school, limiting players to one transfer, and requiring employment contracts? Bryce Underwood is a bust. Okay, we got 3 things to deal with there. We've got the running joke of Drew Aller. Now, will that be a football or an Easter egg he will be tossing to the bunny? I do not know. I'm not in support of any kind of cap under 2 conditions. Here's the 2 things I'm considering. I don't want to come up with some kind of arbitrary number until I understand the health of the overall financial structure. It'd be like me saying, I want to start a YouTube network and I want to pay my producers $50,000 a year. Well, until I start making $50,000 a year on YouTube, I'm not paying producers $50,000 a year, even though they might be worth it. So I need to know what the overall revenue structure is of the sport before I can start doling out caps. And no, I do not believe in capping that figure. And I don't believe in NIL. I'm not saying that I cannot be knocked off of my stance on this, but I just believe, you know what? These players should just negotiate individually with sponsors, just like professional athletes. Just make it a one-on-one partnership, one-on-one relationship that does not involve schools. And just like every other American, doesn't need to go through anything else. And then finally, we got Bryce Underwood's a bust that has remained to be seen. Okay. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate that. Any other comments? I do not believe so. And I will again address that we've been very inconsistent in our content production and live streams here at the Voice of College Football, but it is what it is, and there are other priorities. But I will say that I will be here every Monday night throughout April and May for two reasons. Number one, to address all of the proposed legislation, executive orders, and such concerning the landscape of college football. And then also number two, to give my spring football takes. All right, on to our next category, which would be top 25 finishes. So this, of course, is looking at the AP poll, which again, we do not support or promote in any such way, but over the course of time, a team's not going to go 11-2 and not be ranked. And another team's not going to be 8-5 and get ranked. So it is reasonable. It is generally reasonable where teams are ranked. Like, you cannot look at the final AP ranking this season and say, oh, this is a complete joke. You could say Iowa beat Vanderbilt in a bowl game, therefore they should have been ranked one spot higher or something like that. Like they're off by 2 spots, they're off by 1 spot. But you're not going to find any reasonable college football fan who understands the sport and has any evaluation skills who is going to look at a final AP ranking and say they're off by 7 spots. Now, 2, 1, 3. So it's valid over time. Ohio State and Michigan have been ranked in the final top 25. This is going back to 1936. So 36 through 25, I believe that's 89 seasons, maybe 90. I am surprised it's only 65 actually out of 90. Ohio State and Michigan are number one there at 65, USC 53. There you see Nebraska, of course. They've been hurt by the last 10 years or so. Penn State, UCLA might surprise some people, 32. So they are number 6 in the Big Ten in top 25 finishes. Michigan State, and again, we see some schools down the list here. Iowa, Wisconsin, and Oregon in particular that we think of ranking in the top 25 pretty much all the time. But they had a really horrendous pass. So they're catching up. Oregon's doing a sprint up these rankings. They are sprinting. You got to figure in the last 15 years, I got to think that Oregon's been ranked 12 times. They had one bad year prior to Mario Cristobal with Mark Helfrich. They went 4-8. They had a bad Willie Taggart year, 7-6. Maybe another one thrown in there. But otherwise, Oregon, those 22, they've got 12 in the last 15 years. And on down the line, Rutgers has finished in the AP Top 25 3 times in its history. And Rutgers won the first football game. All right. Now here we have top 10 finishes. Now we get some separation of these categories. Ohio State. Michigan's right there, 45-40. These are top 10 finishes in the final rankings. Nebraska, it's been since like 2008, 9, or 10 for Nebraska. For Ohio State, it's every year. For Michigan, of course, under Harbaugh, the 3 consecutive years at the end of his tenure, and a couple other times. Penn State, of course, lived in the top 10 under Joe Paterno for the most part. And in James Franklin's, what do you have? 13 seasons. They probably finished in the top 10 6 or 7 times. There's USC. UCLA, again, might surprise you with 17 top 10 finishes and on down the line. And while I have been lauding Wisconsin and Iowa being strong football programs in the last 30 to 40 years, they've not been that strong to where they have routinely finished in the top 10. They've been more in the top 15 to 20. Anybody else making a move? Not really. Indiana, of course, finished in the top 10 maybe the last 2 years. I believe they made it in 2024. So Indiana's, I believe, are 1967, 2024, 25. Those are top 10 finishes. How about top 5 finishes? And again, we've got some separation here. Ohio State 32, USC 19, Michigan 18, Penn State, and Nebraska right there. So that's a pretty decent separation for Ohio State football. And they have finished in the top 5 just about every season in the last 25 years. Just about. Well, anyway, I'm not going to go through it. I would say more than half. More than half. USC, obviously, great run under Pete Carroll, John Robinson, John McKay. Michigan, Bo Schembechler. Bo Schembechler, maybe not the top 5. He's got a lot of top 5 finishes, but Bo Schembechler lived in the top 10. I believe the figure with Bo Schembechler at Michigan is that he finished in the top 10. It's either 16 or 18 of 21 seasons. Great consistency under Bo Schembechler. And on down the line of top 5 finishes. Now we move on to claimed national championships. So, without getting into a big controversy here, because that's not the purpose of this particular show, but we are going to claimed national championships. So this is since the beginning of time. You can have all sorts of claimed national championships. Michigan is number 1 in the Big Ten. They are number 2, I believe, in the sport. And I am eliminating, when I will put all this together, I'm eliminating schools that no longer are factors in the sport. So we're getting rid of Harvard and Yale and Dartmouth. Yes, they have their claimed 16 national championships, 14 national championships, whatever. I will still include Army because they are still playing big-time college football. But these are the claimed national championships. Of course, Michigan won its last one in 2023. USC 2004, Ohio State 2024, Minnesota 1960, and on down the line. Nebraska, of course, won 3 under Tom Osborne. And Penn State with 2 national championships under Joe Paterno. And I will actually change this category when I complete my complete review of college football from the beginning of time till now, and we name our voice of college football national champions each season. So, for example, in 1994, Penn State should claim a national championship, and maybe they do. But that is the list of claimed national championships, and Indiana is on the board, and rightfully so. Now, do these other categories matter quite as much? Well, maybe this first one does to a certain extent, but again, not all these categories are created equal. This is just information. I started this category just going with the Associated Press, but then I thought that was unfair to teams that split national championships. So I went to either having a coaches poll national championship or an AP national championship, and this goes back to 1936 for the AP. During this particular time, Ohio State's got the most national championships in the Big Ten, and Michigan kind of drops off the board. So it's kind of interesting to note that Michigan has the most national championships claimed, 12 overall, but since 1936, what is that? 1947, is that the year? 48, 47, 97, 23. Nebraska's got its 4, 3 under Tom Osborne, then the one in 1971, and on down the line. Then we have a very short list of national championships during the era of there being a national championship game. So that's only 1998. And Ohio State's won 3. Looking at the founding teams of the Big Ten, Michigan and Indiana with 1 each here just in the last 3 years. Of course, the Big Ten has won 3 consecutive national championships, and then USC won back-to-back, including their AP national championship when they beat Michigan in the Rose Bowl. All right, Heisman trophies. Now we're starting to get to a place where, do I think this is interesting? Yes. Do I think that this really means much? No. It's one player. It's a vote. Doesn't mean that that player is the best player in the country. It's just a vote. Doesn't mean that much. But USC does have the most Heisman Trophy winners. Of course, the oddity with Ohio State is that they have 6 players, 6 players who have won the Heisman, but they have 7 trophies because they have the only 2-time winner. Michigan's most recent was Charles Woodson in 1997. Desmond Howard, Tom Harmon, right? And on down the line. Those are Heisman trophies. We're not going to review them. You know most of them. Now, again, we've got another category that is highly subjective. But for as subjective as this category is, I do think that it turns out to be somewhat valid because it pretty much, generally lines up. That's as much as I can blow that up. It generally lines up with the objective numbers. And Ohio State's won the most awards. What are those, Mark? Well, those are the position awards. So I believe that every position should be represented. So punter, kicker, all the defensive positions, the Thorpe Award, the Nagurski, the Lombardi, the Remington, the Bolitnikov, the Mackey, the Doak Walker, the Davy O'Brien. I believe I went with the Davy O'Brien or the Johnny Unitas. There you go. Ohio State with the most awards. I don't know if that's the number one figure in all of college football. Yeah, it's close. Nebraska 23, Iowa tied with Michigan. Penn State, USC, and on down the line. And Indiana's got 2, and I believe both of them were this year. How about that? All right. Next up, we've got All-Americans. Again, highly subjective. However, the subjective votes of these writers and broadcasters do line up with the overall dominance of these programs throughout the years. So it's pretty close to being what you would expect it to be. Ohio State and Michigan are at the top, then USC, and then a drop off to Nebraska, Penn State, UCLA. Again, acquitting itself rather well with 42 consensus All-Americans. And on down the list. Isn't it just the disparity to think that over the course of playing football for 100 plus years, that Ohio State would have 100 All-Americans and Rutgers 4? Interesting. Oregon, despite their high level of play over the last 15 years, has only had 11 All-Americans. So there are the numbers there. Now we get to the NFL draft. And of course, these numbers are going to change in about 3 weeks. So I will update these at that time. USC has had more players drafted than any school. I believe Notre Dame is number 2 and Ohio State is number 3 nationally. Michigan is there. Penn State, Nebraska. Now, it's one thing to look at these placeholders and say USC's number 1, Ohio State's 2, Michigan's 3, Penn State, Nebraska. And so it appears as though Penn State, Nebraska are right there with, let's say, USC. But think of the percentage difference. Nebraska's at 370. They're at 164 less than USC. So USC basically has 35 or 40%, maybe more than that. No, about 35 or 40% more, really close to 50% more NFL draft selections than Nebraska. That's a big number. Again, UCLA doing pretty well. Washington, Michigan State. There's that UCLA, Washington, Michigan State, Wisconsin tier. A school that has done well under first Hayden Fry, but more so Kirk Ferentz, is Iowa. They have a lot of catching up to do, but I would bet if we went back 20 years, Iowa would sink. Oregon would sink because those two schools have been well represented in the NFL draft in recent years. And there you see that Indiana, being one of the worst programs in history, is still miles beyond Rutgers in NFL draft picks. Jim, I'm right there with you. Now, I've got a pretty good handle on the history of UCLA football. At least, again, I started watching in 1978. And I've got a really good handle on everything, let's say, post-1960. Now, before that, of course, I know who was good and who wasn't. But in terms of, like, remembering what the standings were in the AP rankings in 1940. That's not me. But I can't say I'm super surprised with UCLA because I know the 70s, the 80s, the 90s were really good decades for UCLA football. But these recent years haven't dragged them down that horribly. All right, so those are NFL draft selections. Now we get to first round picks. And Ohio State's number one in all of college football. And there's USC. And Ohio State has passed USC in the last 10 years. Michigan. And there you see a drastic drop off. Like I was talking about the disparity between number one and number five in overall draft picks. Look at the disparity between, let's say, Ohio State and Michigan. That's almost, not almost double, but 85 to 90% more first round picks. There's UCLA. They're number 5 in the history of Big Ten schools. And you know that number has been stagnant for, if we went back 20 years, UCLA would be really high on these lists. Michigan State, Nebraska. I'm a bit surprised that UCLA and Michigan State rank higher in first round picks than Nebraska. And again, Iowa's catching up, Oregon, and on down the list. Rutgers has had all of 3 first round picks in its history. And then we move on to our last 2 categories, and then we'll put it all together. Do I believe that these categories mean much of anything? No, they're just fun to put up there. So we will do that. College Football Hall of Famers. Don't get me started on College Football Hall of Fame induction because I think it's partially a joke. USC's number 1, Michigan's 2, Ohio State's 3, Penn State, and on down the line. College Football Hall of Famers. So let's see. For example, well, I'm not going to get into the particulars, except to say that Notre Dame is number 1 with 50. USC's number 2. Michigan's number 3. Ohio State's number 4. So those numbers represented right there are numbers 2, 3, and 4 in all of college football between USC, Michigan, and Ohio State. And then we get to look at, oh my word, Pro Football Hall of Famers. And USC, again, is number 1. Think of the players USC has produced. O.J. Simpson, Marcus Allen, Ron Yeri, and Junior Seau. And I'm actually looking for the list here. Those are the first few that come to mind for me. Marcus Allen, Morris Badgrow, Frank Gifford, Ronnie Lott, Bruce Matthews, Ron Mix, great San Diego Charger, Anthony Munoz, of course, Troy Polamalu, Junior Seau, O.J. Simpson, Lynn Swann, Willie Wood, great Green Bay Packer, Ron Yeri, Tony Baselli. I know all of those players, except I'm not familiar with Morris Badgrow. That's the USC list. The Michigan list, are they number 2? Let me get back to yes, Michigan's number 2. The Michigan list of Pro Football Hall of Famers includes I think you can all name one of them. But we've got George Allen, Dan Deerdorf, the great Monday Night Football announcer, St. Louis Cardinal, Len Ford, Benny Friedman, great player, yes, Bill Hewitt, Crazy Legs Hirsch, Steve Hutchinson, Ty Law, Tom Mack, Ralph Wilson, Charles Woodson. And there's another guy who may be inducted here in the next year or two. And I'll just look at Ohio State, where we've got, I believe, 10 is the number. Chris Carter, Sid Gilman, one of the great offensive minds in the history of the NFL. Lou Groza, the toe. Dante Lavelli, so two great Cleveland Browns. Dick LeBeau, great defensive mind. Orlando Pace, Jim Parker, Ed Sable, Paul Warfield, the great Miami Dolphin and Cleveland Brown, and Bill Willis. There you go. All right. Then we put it all together. And I will actually take this, before we get to the point totals, there is the listing of Pac-12 conference winning percentage. This is the winning percentage for these schools in conference games. And so I gave credit to these schools and assimilated these numbers into the conference winning percentage for the Big Ten to try to bring it all together. And I did the same thing with conference championships. So yes, USC, dominant, and on down the line. UCLA has the second best winning percentage in the history of the Pac-12 in conference games. And then you've got this large contingent of schools that are now in the Big 12 and elsewhere. The ACC, yes. All right. Now on to that mess. So basically what I did there. So I would expect all of you to memorize those lists right there. What I did there was I took the first number there you see with USC is that they were number 1 in 8 categories. Now you may say, Mark, they were not number 8 in 8 categories, number 1. No, they were, but if you take into consideration their place in the Pac-12, and I assimilated that to make this more fair and try to make a reasonable comparison. So just to give you one example, USC finished number 1 in 8 categories out of 24. And again, this is going to be shared. They're going to be shared number 1 positions and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. They finished number 2 in 6 categories, number 3 in 6 categories, number 5 in 2 categories, number 6 once, and number 8 once. I don't think it's too difficult to see that Ohio State's got the most dominant performance. They're number 1 in 16 categories. They're number 2 in 4. They're number 3 in 4. That's the worst they did. Number 3. I think that was major bowl wins and something else. Actually, the Pro Football Hall of Fame and the College Football Hall of Fame penalized Ohio State to a certain degree in this exercise. And on the downside, you see where, for example, like Indiana's atrocious, Rutgers is atrocious, and so forth. So then I came up with a point system that is not what I want it to be. I'm going to weight this because should Pro Football Hall of Famers be just as valid and be weighted just as much as winning percentage? No. So I simply took all of the rankings and I gave 1 point to a first place finish, 2 points to a second, 3 points to a third, 18 points to an 18th place finish, And then so the less points you have, the more dominant you are. And these are the point totals. Now, again, I'm going to change this around slightly when I put it all together because Pro Football Hall of Famers should not equate to the same value as conference championships or national championships or winning percentage. But I would expect this is going to weigh out almost exactly the same, even after those tweaks. So just based on mere placement in all these categories, Ohio State's a clear number 1, USC's 2, Michigan's right there as well, Penn State, Nebraska, largely on its dominance in the Big 8 and the Big 12. There you see UCLA, Washington, Michigan State, Iowa coming up the board in recent years, Wisconsin, Minnesota talk about coming up the board, Oregon still all-time very deep in the rankings, Illinois, Maryland, Purdue, Northwestern, Indiana, Rutgers. Is this a perfect system? No. Is it a really good system? Yes. So that's what I have for the Big Ten. And again, when we put it all together with the SEC, the Big 12, the ACC, and Notre Dame, I'm going to tweak the weight given to each one of these categories because I do not believe that, for example, I may actually add, well, I'll get to that later. I'm not going to add this as a category to be weighted, but I think I will add a category of like BCS and playoff appearances, something like that, which would be interesting to give it a look. All right, folks, we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Again, you will see me on Monday night to talk spring football and to talk my takes on the latest release with this executive order, eligibility requirements, transfer portal, NIL, and everything that's being discussed, debated, and will be addressed at some point in college football that will change the sport forever. Thanks for being here. Please like, subscribe, share the video out there, get these rankings out there, see what people think about them. And again, yes, Michael, I'm taking calls. I left the, we'll do a going once, going twice. Yes, I'm taking calls. That was the whole point of this. So there it is, Michael. If you would like to discuss, or anyone else, there's the call-in line. Going once, going twice, and going 3 times. The Voice of College Football presented by FanDuel. And please like the video and subscribe. Amazon links in the description section of this video and all the videos. When you shop on Amazon, please use the link that we provide. Michael, how you doing today?
Good. Happy Easter, Mark.
Happy Easter.
All right. Hey, I got a question and stuff like that. I was looking, for the most part, I agree with what you said, but did you do also like percentage of conference wins for each team in the Big Ten?
Yes.
What did you have Purdue's at?
Talking about their winning percentage in conference games?
Yes.
Glad you did.
I'll throw it up here in a second. I got this from the same people that do profootballreference.com. I don't know what they call their college site, but it's the best that I've ever seen.
All right.
So the winning percentage in the Big Ten, this is such a pain to try to get to. There it is. So that is your winning percentage in Big Ten conference games.
Hey, hang on, let me look back up. What did it? 420? I must have read something wrong because I was on Wikipedia and they said it's like over 500 or something. or closer to 500.
Okay.
But
are you looking at their winning percentage? Of all their games? Michael, you with us?
Mark, can you hear me?
I can now.
All right. Because I was looking on there and they said they have like a winning percentage of like 703. But that was like between the Indiana and stuff like
Who's
that.
got
But
a winning percentage of 703?
in the conference, yeah, I was looking it up on Google.
Who?
Purdue.
Purdue's got a winning percentage of 703?
In the conference. That's what it says.
Who? They're insane. Michael, you know that without even thinking about it. Purdue's not winning 70% of its games in conference. That's completely asinine and absurd. Go ahead. Those people are, you either misread that or you came across the worst college football site known to man.
No, I Googled it. And
okay, well then you Googled it incorrectly or something's wrong. Look at that. Can you read this screen?
I can read the screen.
What I'm looking at right here.
Yeah.
All right. So what this is, the column I have highlighted, that is the winning percentage of every school in the Big Ten in conference games.
Okay.
See, Oregon, they've only played 2 years. They're 17-1. They've got the best winning percentage in Big Ten history, technically. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. These are exact numbers that I'm taking from.
Okay. All
Purdue,
right.
447. They've won 352 and lost 440.
I know, but I was just Googling it just to see what Purdue's conference, but that said stuff like that, but that's a different subject for a different day, though. But no, you said Purdue was pretty decent in the 8 mark. I was going to say from like 1981 to 1996, Purdue was straight garbage.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Okay. Can you see their record here that I'm pulling up right now?
Yeah. From 1981 to 1996.
Michael, I know you're Mr. Purdue, but I sat through all those college football seasons too. This is what I was talking about. I said from the time I started watching, 1978, 9-2-1, 10-2, 9-3, 5-6, 2 horrible years, 3-8, 3-7. Then you got the Jim Everett years. This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They go 7-5 there. And then I said I was speaking in generalities from the mid 80s or so until, through Jim Coletto until the 97 season. Yeah, they were terrible.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I was saying.
About. Okay.
Purdue was
I misspoke by 3 seasons or something. I was speaking in general historical terms from the mid 80s to 1997. Okay.
I was including from like 1982 on to 1996 is what I was going for.
Okay.
And stuff like that.
Yes, I was factoring in this one season in which I remember Jim Everett was the quarterback. They beat Ohio State 7-5 in '84.
You know who also they beat that year too?
Did they go to the Peach Bowl that year?
They went to the Peach Bowl. That lost Virginia 27-24. But that was year also they beat Notre Dame, Michigan, and Ohio State in the same season until what was it?
Yeah, and they went 6-3 in the Big Ten. So
yeah.
Yep. So that was basically my benchmark in my memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't remember that they were so bad in 82 and 83 because 81, and I was also thinking they were better in 81. I wasn't thinking about 82, 83 because I remember in 81, they gave Ohio State a heck of a game with Rich Campbell at quarterback.
Scott Campbell.
Yeah. Rich Campbell played at Cal. I mix them up.
Yeah.
That was a
But I'm
great
trying to
game.
remember, was Schleicher there in '81?
Yes.
So that was a game they both threw for combined for almost 1,100 yards that day. I think
Yeah.
Campbell had 533 and Schleicher threw for like what 560.
No, that's a little high, but it was a great game. Yes,
But
I'll look up the numbers. I think you're a little high on these numbers. I'm
all
guessing
right,
one of them, they were both around 400, but I'm
no,
going to guess they were more in the 380 range.
nope. You'll be surprised when you see the numbers, Mark.
All right. They did not throw for 1,100 yards.
Combined. And I'll
Okay.
wait while you look it up too. So
See, we got the stat. No, that doesn't have the stats. Let me see if we can find the box score. Well, we've got it's the Purdue website. They don't have the box score. They just have the score. Let's see the Wikipedia page. Let's see if they. Oh shoot, they don't have it. Oh no, somebody added the box. They only have the box score for one game, and it's the Ohio State game. So lucky us. It's on Wikipedia. This should be fun. Let's look at this because I remember watching this game and I was scared to death because, yeah, it was 17-14 at half. And all right. Yeah, Scott Campbell threw for 516 and Art Schleitzer threw for 336. So 852.
okay, I don't know why because I thought there was some game where each quarterback threw for over 500.
Against Ohio State?
No, yeah.
Well, your boy Drew Brees threw for how many in 2000? He had a huge game when
He only
Purdue
ended
went
up
to the
with
Rose Bowl.
yeah. Let's
But
see. Hang on here.
Steve Belisari threw for him a lot of yardage, but it wasn't anything crazy. Schleitzer set the all-time passing record at Ohio State against Florida State in the same season.
Mm-hmm.
He threw for 458. That was the Ohio State record for a long, long time until Dwayne Haskins broke it against somebody.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Drew for that game was 35, 39. Yeah. I don't know why I was thinking that Schleicher threw for over 500. I don't know why. It seemed like every play was like a passing play that game, that day.
Ohio State was a little more balanced. Tim Spencer ran for 95.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, Steve Bryant, Purdue, 195 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And I remember that this game, yes, was on ABC. And do you remember who the play-by-play announcer for this game was? Here's a good question for the chat. The 1981 Ohio State-Purdue game on ABC. Do you recall the play-by-play announcer?
I don't think it was Keith Jackson, was it?
It was Al Michaels.
That's what I was thinking also because I was because the first time I ever seen Al Michaels call a game Purdue game was when they went up to Michigan in 1980 and Purdue was shut out 26-0. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Herman's chin got busted.
Yeah, that was a brutal game. I watched that visiting my grandma and I were on a visit in Pennsylvania. I remember watching that game and Purdue had a chance to win the Big Ten championship. And yeah, Michigan's defense that year was
straight
great.
Brutal.
They the very next week they went to Columbus and held Ohio State to a field goal. 9-3.
Yeah, because I was saying, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't it an all field goal game?
9-3, yes, the Ohio State Michigan game, and Ohio State was number 5 in the country, and they still had an outside chance to win the national championship.
Okay, now another thing I'm trying to figure out: the 1979 game with IU and Michigan, where Anthony Thomas scored. I'm trying to think. Was John Carter? Sorry, was John Wangler the quarterback then?
79, yes.
Yes, and if I'm not mistaken, didn't IU score? And there's maybe a minute and a half left to go in the game, and Michigan just like 3 plays and they scored on the last play of the game or something.
I can't.
Well, it was the last play of the game, but
I can't say that for sure. But that sounds right. Let's see. Indiana.
I'm trying to think who the quarterback. I don't think it was Babe Wassenberg. What a name for a quarterback, by the way.
No, that was oh shoot, what was his? Was it wasn't his last name Clifford?
I can't remember.
Let's see. Yeah, Babe Laufenberg. His first year with the Cowboys was in the late 80s. So he was let's see what we got here. What was I thought his let's see, Anthony Carter. Is this on the
Yeah.
screen? What I'm looking
Yeah,
up?
I can see it.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
All right. So that's the Carter catch. There's the video.
Yep.
Radio. Let's see if they've got any. They probably just have all the Michigan stuff. Yeah, it doesn't look like this is all just about they were down 27-21 and yeah, there's nothing about Indiana's.
All right.
It was
Is Monday,
as we both know. Yeah.
now is Monday's show going to be topics, presidents, or is it going to be an open show?
Well, we can talk about whatever you want to.
All right, because I'm going to look into this more, and maybe we can talk about it more on Monday. So,
yeah, I would really like to see this box score from this Michigan game. Michigan was number 10 in the country.
Yeah, because wasn't that the year that IU went to, was it? No, I can't remember what bowl game though. Yeah, and then they BYU beat him like on the last play of the game or something on Hail Mary, or was it the other way?
I think was the final.
Now, was Steve Young the quarterback, or was it Jim McMahon?
Jim McMahon.
All right, because I know Steve Young was at BYU, but I didn't know if he was there, if they was there at the same time. Or
Steve Young was there in 80, 81, 82, 83. It was Jim McMahon before that. And then Robbie Bosco was the quarterback in 84 that beat Michigan in the Holiday Bowl for BYU to win the national championship.
Because I'm trying to remember was Steve Young there, because if I'm not mistaken, did he originally get drafted by the Buccaneers, or was it by the Tampa Bay? It was either the Buccaneers or it was the USFL team. I can't remember who it was.
He got drafted by both of them.
Oh, was he?
Chose to go to the USFL, but he got drafted by the Buccaneers.
All right. Well, Mark, I gotta let you go because my battery's about dead. But like I said, what time will the stream be Monday night?
We're gonna go on after the basketball game.
So about 11 o'clock. All right, sounds good. Again, happy Easter to you and everybody else.
Easter. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
All right. We always enjoy the back and forth with our buddy Michael, because he's been a long-time viewer, and Michael knows his stuff and knows college football history. All right, folks. Do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football again. We will be here after the men's championship game on Saturday to talk executive order and all that business, to talk spring football and anything you want concerning college football right here at the Voice of College Football.